It all started on a typical Tuesday morning. The kind of day you don't expect anything to happen, let alone your life to completely shatter. I was making breakfast in the kitchen, flipping pancakes for my husband, Mark. The smell of coffee filled the air and everything felt right. I was happy. Or, at least, I thought I was. I had been with Mark for over a decade. We had our ups and downs like any marriage, but nothing too serious. Or so I thought. We had a comfortable life. Our house, our routines, and our plans for the future. I had always believed that we were solid, that our bond was unbreakable. But I was wrong, so wrong. It wasn't the first time we had a small argument. We had disagreements like everyone else. But that morning, Mark wasn't acting like himself. As I served his breakfast, I noticed something in his eyes. A coldness, a distance that I had never seen before. He didn't smile at me like usual. Instead, he sat at the table, pushing his food around, barely looking up. "Mark, is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. But my voice wavered, and I felt a knot in my stomach. He didn't respond right away. The silence in the room felt heavy, suffocating even. I watched him carefully, waiting for some kind of answer. Then, with a sharp sigh, he put down his fork, his eyes finally meeting mine. "You need to leave," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I'm done." For a moment, I froze. My heart skipped a beat. What did he just say? Did I hear that correctly? "Done? What do you mean done?" I stammered, my mind racing to process what was happening. He didn't even flinch. "I mean it. I want you out. Pack your things and go." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had no idea what had triggered this. There was no argument that had escalated to this level, no warning signs, no hints that anything was wrong. "Mark, what's going on? We're fine, aren't we?" I asked, trying to keep the panic in check. My hands were shaking as I set my coffee mug down on the counter. My mind was spinning. "I'm tired, okay? Tired of pretending. I don't love you anymore. I haven't for a while." His words hit me like a slap across the face. I could hardly breathe. "You need to leave. Now." I stood there, frozen. A million thoughts ran through my head, but none of them made sense. How could he say this? How could he just drop a bombshell like this and expect me to walk away without a fight? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I wanted to scream, to beg him to explain, but I couldn't find the words. "Please, Mark, you can't be serious," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond. Instead, he stood up, picked up his coat, and started walking toward the door as if this was all just a normal, everyday occurrence. He was leaving, and he was leaving me behind. I followed him, still in shock. "Where are you going? What about us?" I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't stop, he didn't even look back at me. "You'll figure it out, just don't come back." I watched as he walked out the door, his footsteps echoing in my ears. The front door slammed behind him, and the sound of it felt like my whole world crumbling down. I stood there, completely still. My mind couldn't catch up with what had just happened. The man I had loved, the man I had spent so many years with, had just kicked me out of our life. My stomach twisted with a mix of confusion, hurt, and anger. How could he do this? Why? I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. I slowly sank to the couch, my hands trembling. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt empty and cold. The silence around me was deafening. I felt a deep ache in my chest, like I was suffocating. My thoughts were scattered, like pieces of glass on the floor, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. How could he just throw everything away? How could he not even care? Was I really that unimportant to him? I looked around the house, at the life we had built together. The pictures on the walls, the memories in every corner, now felt like a cruel joke. I had given everything to this marriage. My time, my love, my trust, and he had just taken it all for granted. Tears welled up in my eyes. I fought to hold them back, but I couldn't. The hurt, the betrayal, the shock, it was too much. I had never felt so small, so worthless. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, something caught my eye, a small wooden box on the shelf. It was my mother's old box, a keepsake she had left behind when she passed. I hadn't thought about it in years, but now it felt like a sign. I walked over to the box and opened it. Inside, there was an old credit card, yellowed with age. My mother's card. It was a relic from a time long gone, but it was something that could help me now. My heart raced as I held it in my hand. My mother had always told me to never rely on others, to always have a backup plan. This card was her safety net for emergencies. I stared at it for a moment, hesitating. I didn't know what to do, but then I remembered Mark's words, "You'll figure it out." How could I figure it out without any resources, without any money? He had taken everything from me, even the money in our joint account. I had nothing left. I took a deep breath. This was my only option. I had no choice. I walked to the phone and dialed the number on the back of the card. The voice on the other end was formal, businesslike, asking me to verify my identity. I hesitated again. What if they found out it was my mother's card, long inactive? What if they refused to activate it? But the voice on the other end simply asked, "How may I assist you today?" "I'd like to activate this card," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief pause. "Certainly, please give me a moment." The silence was unbearable as I waited, heart pounding. Was this going to work? Was I about to risk everything on a card that had been dormant for years? After what felt like an eternity, the voice came back on the line. "Your card has been activated. Is there anything else I can assist you with today?" I could hardly believe it. The card had worked. It was active. I had a lifeline. But as I hung up the phone, a part of me felt sick. I had just crossed a line. I had just made a choice that could change everything, and I wasn't sure if it was the right one. I looked around the empty house, at the life that had just been ripped away from me. But in that moment, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I was going to fight. I was going to find a way to make it out on my own, to take control of my life again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to give up. Not this time. And no matter what it took, I was going to make it out of this, stronger than ever. I sat there for a long time after I activated my mother's old card, staring at it in my hand. My heart was still racing, but a sense of numbness had begun to settle in. The reality of my situation was slowly sinking in. Mark was gone. The life I had known for the last decade was no more. I had no idea where I was going, no plan, no clue about what to do next. The world outside my window seemed distant, as if it didn't belong to me anymore. The quiet of the house felt suffocating. I could still smell the pancakes I had made for Mark. They had been his favorite. Now, they sat untouched, a reminder of a life that was no longer mine. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood. People were going about their evening routines, their lives continuing without a care. Meanwhile, I was stuck in this overwhelming mess, trying to figure out how to put the pieces of my broken world back together. I knew I had to act, but where do you even begin when your entire life falls apart in a single moment? I glanced back at the card in my hand. I had no idea how much money was on it, but it was my only option. I didn't have a job anymore. I didn't even have a car. Everything I had depended on Mark, his income, his support. I had nothing, not anymore. There was no way I was going to sit here and cry all night. I wasn't going to wallow in self-pity. I had to do something, anything. I picked up my phone and began scrolling through job listings, hopping to find something, anything, that would help me get back on my feet. But every job I looked at felt out of reach. I had no skills beyond what I had done for Mark's business, and that wasn't going to help me now. My qualifications felt useless. I wasn't even sure what I was qualified for anymore. I paused, staring at the screen. What did I want to do? I didn't know. My whole life had been about being Mark's wife. I didn't even know who I was without him. My thoughts spiraled again, but this time I refused to let them take over. I had a choice, and that choice was to survive. I set my phone down and walked into the kitchen, staring at the empty countertops. I wasn't going to be this person, the one who let life crush her. No, I wasn't weak. I wasn't going to be some woman who let the world tell her she couldn't make it. I had a lot to prove, not to anyone else but to myself. I needed to figure out what to do next. But first, I had to get out of this house. It wasn't just the place Mark and I had shared. It was suffocating. It held too many memories, too many painful reminders of what had been. I grabbed my keys, tossed the card in my purse, and walked out the door. The city streets were bustling, people going about their evening errands. It felt like a completely different world from the one I had been living in. I didn't know where I was going, but I walked, letting the rhythm of the world around me help calm my racing thoughts. My mind kept drifting back to that moment in the kitchen. The moment Mark had torn everything apart. I still couldn't wrap my mind around it. How could someone who had promised to love me forever just decide he was done? It didn't make sense. But there was no going back. I wasn't going to beg him to take me back. He had made his choice. And now, I had to make mine. I had no job, no home, no support. But I did have that card. That old piece of plastic that I had never expected to need. It wasn't much, but it was all I had, and I was going to use it. I found myself walking into a small coffee shop. It wasn't much, but the warmth of the place felt welcoming. I ordered a coffee and sat at a table by the window. As I sipped the hot drink, I felt the tightness in my chest ease just a little. It wasn't much, but for the first time that day, I felt like I could breathe. I thought about what I could do next. I didn't want to go back to my old life. I didn't want to go back to the way things were. I had to start over from scratch. But where? How? I pulled the card from my purse and held it in my hand again. I knew that I had to make every penny count. There was no room for mistakes. The next few days were a blur. I found a small apartment, not much, but it was a start. I scoured job listings, applying to anything I could find. Some didn't even respond, while others turned me away because I didn't have the right experience. I began to feel the weight of the world on my shoulders again, but this time, it was different. I wasn't going to let the rejections tear me down. I was done with feeling sorry for myself. I was done with being the victim. So I took a different approach. Instead of waiting for someone to give me a chance, I decided to create my own. I signed up for an online course. I figured I could learn something new, something that would help me stand on my own. It was an investment, one I wasn't sure I could afford, but I had to do it. I used the card to pay for the course. It was scary. Every time I swiped it, I felt like I was gambling with my future, but I didn't have a choice. A week passed, then two. I still hadn't found a job, but the course was keeping me busy. It gave me something to focus on, a reason to get up every morning. Every day, I learned something new. The more I learned, the more I realized that I could do this. I could make something of myself. I wasn't just Mark's wife. I was me, and I was capable of more than I had ever given myself credit for. Still, the reality of my situation hit me hard every now and then. The bill collectors had started calling, and I had to juggle between paying for the course and making sure I didn't run out of money. I began looking for part-time work, but each day seemed to bring more challenges. But I kept going, because giving up wasn't an option. One afternoon, after another rejection from a job interview, I walked back to my apartment, feeling exhausted. It felt like I was stuck in the same cycle of failure, and I was beginning to wonder if I was ever going to break free. When I got home, I checked my email and found something unexpected, an email from the course I had signed up for. It was an offer for a job referral. A company was looking for someone with my skills. I couldn't believe it. The course hadn't just taught me something useful, it had opened a door. I sent in my resume immediately. I couldn't let this chance slip away. A few days later, I got the call. "Hi, is this?" the voice on the other end asked. I held my breath. "Yes, this is me. We'd like to offer you a position. When can you start?" My heart leaped. I had done it. I had finally found my way out. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I had come a long way in just a few weeks. From the moment Mark kicked me out to this point, I had fought for every step I had taken. I wasn't there yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time, I felt like I had control again. I was building my life back up, one decision at a time. I was no longer the woman who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was becoming someone stronger, someone independent. And no matter what came next, I was ready to face it. Tomorrow was a new day, and it was mine for the taking. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. It was hard to remember what had happened just a few weeks ago, but I could still feel the sting of Mark's words in my chest. "I'm done," he had said. "You need to leave." The betrayal had been sharp, sudden, and unrelenting. But now, as I sat in my small apartment, I could almost convince myself that I was okay. I had a job now, something I never thought I would have just a few weeks ago. And still, in the back of my mind, I knew things weren't as simple as they seemed. It was a late afternoon when everything began to unravel. I had just come back from my second day at work, a part-time job at a local cafe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I could feel the independence slowly building inside me with every hour I worked. There was something empowering about earning my own money, about not having to rely on anyone but myself. But as I walked through the door of my apartment, that nagging feeling from the pit of my stomach returned. I wasn't alone in this world anymore. I wasn't just a wife, I wasn't just Mark's partner. I was learning to be me, and I wasn't sure who I was yet. But there was still one piece of the puzzle that felt incomplete: that damn card. My mother's old card, the one I had used to pay for the course, was still sitting in my purse. I hadn't used it for anything else since that first swipe. The card had been a lifeline when I was desperate, but I was terrified of what might happen if I used it too much. I couldn't just rely on it forever. I had to figure out how to stand on my own. But something inside me told me that I still wasn't free. I knew that card wasn't the solution to everything. It was just a temporary fix. I tossed my jacket on the couch and sat down, glancing at my phone. There were a few messages from the bank, but I didn't think much of it. I was too tired, too overwhelmed to deal with anything else. Then my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but something in my gut told me to answer it. I picked up, my heart pounding slightly as I said, "Hello." "Is this my name?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, but with an edge of urgency. "Yes, this is she," I replied, my heart rate picking up. "I'm calling from bank name. We've noticed some suspicious activity on your account. Specifically, there was an unusually large transaction made recently. We need to confirm that it was you." My blood went cold. My fingers tightened around the phone. "What kind of transaction?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "There was a charge made for a course you signed up for. The payment came from a dormant account that hasn't been used in several years. Can you confirm that you authorized this charge?" I froze. My mind raced as I thought back to that moment when I swiped my mother's old card. I hadn't given it a second thought. I was just trying to survive. But now, the bank was questioning it. The whole thing felt wrong, like I was stepping into some deep, dark hole that I couldn't crawl out of. Yes, that was me. It's my mother's card," I said, my voice cracking. "It's been in my possession for years. I didn't think there'd be any issues." There was a long pause on the other end. "I see. The thing is, this is a very old account, and according to our records, this card hasn't been activated in over a decade. This kind of activity is unusual, and we need to verify a few more details before we can proceed." My chest tightened. I could feel the walls closing in on me. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Well," the voice on the other end hesitated. "There's no way for us to know if the account was legally activated under your name, and we need to investigate further. We'll need to freeze your account until we've completed our checks." "Freeze my account?" I repeated, the words making my stomach churn. "What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my finances?" "It means you won't be able to access any funds from that card until we complete our investigation," the representative said bluntly. "We'll send you an official notification in the next 48 hours. I suggest you review any transactions you've made recently as well." The line went silent, and my mind swirled in a panic. What had I done? I had used my mother's card in a desperate moment, not thinking about the consequences. Now, my only lifeline was being ripped away from me, and I had no idea how long it would take to get it back. I was stuck. I hung up the phone and let out a shaky breath. The walls around me felt tighter, and I could barely catch my breath. It wasn't just the card I was worried about. It was the whole situation. Everything I had done since Mark kicked me out had been built on shaky ground. The job, the apartment, everything, it was all precarious. And now, the one thing I thought would help me through was falling apart. I slumped back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced as I thought of how I was going to make it through. I couldn't go back to Mark. I couldn't rely on anyone else. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. "Mark here, I need to talk to you. We need to figure this out." I stared at the message. The old me would have rushed to reply, desperate for any chance to fix things, but not anymore. I wasn't going to beg him. I wasn't going to let him pull me back into that toxic world. I didn't respond. Instead, I tossed my phone on the coffee table and stood up. My body felt heavy with the weight of everything, but there was no time to waste. I couldn't let myself drown in worry. I had to keep moving forward, no matter how much it scared me. The next few hours were a blur. I spent time on the phone with the bank, trying to get clarity on the situation, but all I got were more questions, more delays. They couldn't promise me anything, and I was left waiting in limbo. I had to think about other options, but my mind kept drifting back to that card. If I didn't get access to it again soon, I would be in trouble. I had to come up with a plan, and I had to do it fast. In the quiet of my small apartment, I realized just how much I had been relying on something that wasn't truly mine. My mother's card had been a desperate measure, but now it felt like a chain, weighing me down instead of helping me rise. I couldn't rely on it anymore. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. I woke up early the next morning, determined to take control of my situation. The panic from the day before still lingered, but I was tired of feeling helpless. I had to make things right for myself. I started by making a list of everything I could do next. The job at the cafe was a start, but it wasn't enough. I needed a more stable income. I needed something that would help me break free from this cycle of uncertainty. I pulled my phone out and started browsing the internet for job opportunities. I wasn't picky. I had to find something that would pay the bills and give me the chance to build something solid. I knew that I couldn't rely on the bank for answers. I had to take matters into my own hands. By the end of the day, I had sent out a dozen applications. Some were for full-time positions, others were part-time or freelance work. But every single one of them was a step toward securing my future. I was no longer waiting for something to happen. I was making it happen. That night, I fell into bed exhausted but hopeful. The panic hadn't fully gone away, but I was starting to feel something new inside me, determination. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. Not today, not ever. The following weeks were a blur of work, uncertainty, and small victories. I kept pushing forward, my mind constantly on the move. I had to keep going. There was no other choice. Each day, I woke up early and walked to the cafe where I had my part-time job. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I wasn't depending on anyone anymore, and that feeling, while exhausting, was also empowering. But even with my new routine, something still nagged at me. The card, the frozen account, the constant worry about my finances. I hadn't been able to use my mother's card since the bank had flagged the transaction. I knew I couldn't keep relying on it forever. I couldn't live in fear of being caught. I had to find another way. That evening, as I sat on my couch after a long day, scrolling through job postings, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed. I looked down, surprised to see a message from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, is this my name? This is Linda from the Career Services office at College Name. I received your resume and wanted to chat with you about an opportunity." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't even remember sending my resume to any college career services, but there it was, an opportunity, and I needed to grab it. I quickly typed a response. "Yes, this is my name. I'd love to talk. What's the opportunity?" A few moments later, Linda replied, "Great, I saw your background in customer service and noticed that you're looking for something more stable. We have an opening with a local firm that could be a great fit for you. It's part-time to start, but the potential for full-time is there once you prove yourself. Are you available to chat tomorrow?" I stared at the screen, my fingers frozen above the keyboard. Part-time, stability, a chance at something more. This could be exactly what I needed. I couldn't let this slip away. I typed back, trying not to sound too eager, but I knew I was. "Yes, I'm available tomorrow. What time works best for you?" The next day, I was up at the crack of dawn, preparing for my conversation with Linda. I didn't even bother with my usual routine. I didn't have the time to waste. This was my chance to finally pull myself out of this hole I had found myself in. When I called Linda, she was warm and professional, and we quickly got into the details. "This position is with a local marketing firm," she explained. "We need someone who is organized, a good communicator, and can handle administrative tasks. I think you'd be a great fit." Her words filled me with hope. This could be it, a real job, something with potential. "What's the pay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though I was desperate to know. She told me it wasn't much to start, a modest salary with room for growth once I proved myself. But the most important thing was that it was a real opportunity, a chance to build a career. I hung up the phone feeling light. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right path. It wasn't the glamorous life I had once imagined, but it was a step forward. And that was all I needed right now. The next week, I went in for the interview. I wore my best outfit, tried to keep my nerves under control, and did my best to show up as the person I knew I could be. The marketing firm was a small office, but the energy there felt different from anything I had experienced in the past few months. It wasn't the cold, calculating environment I had been living in with Mark. It felt fresh. It felt alive. The interview went well. I was nervous, but I could tell that the hiring manager, Sarah, liked me. She asked a lot of questions about my previous experience, and I answered each one carefully. "I think you'll fit in here just fine," she said, smiling at the end of the interview. "We'll give you a call soon. Thanks for coming in today." I left the building, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I wanted this job more than anything. It was the kind of opportunity I had been waiting for, something that would help me truly start over. The next few days passed in a blur of waiting. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a call from the firm. I worked at the cafe, trying to keep my mind off of the possibility, but deep down, I knew I was already counting on that job. Finally, 2 days later, I got the call I had been waiting for. "Hi, it's Sarah from company name. I'm happy to inform you that we'd like to offer you the position," she said, her voice warm and confident. "We're excited to have you join the team." I couldn't help it. I let out a laugh, half in disbelief, half in joy. "Thank you, I'm so excited. I won't let you down." She laughed too. "I'm sure you won't. Welcome to the team." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. It was real. I had a job, a real, stable job. It wasn't much to start, but it was a beginning, and that was everything to me. I started the new job the following week, and immediately everything felt different. The people were friendly, the work was challenging, but not overwhelming. I learned so much in my first few days. I wasn't just getting by anymore. I was building something, and with every task I completed, I grew a little bit more confident. The small apartment that had once felt like a trap now felt like a home. I was no longer drowning in a sea of uncertainty. I had a future ahead of me, one that I was creating. But even with all the progress, something still lingered in the back of my mind. That damn card. I had been using it for small things, just enough to keep my head above water. But now, with the new job and my growing sense of independence, I knew I couldn't rely on it forever. It was time to cut that last lifeline and truly stand on my own. One evening, after work, I sat down with the card in my hand. I stared at it for a long time, the weight of it heavy in my palm. It had been my safety net, but now it felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I could still feel the panic I had felt when the bank froze my account. But now, I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I was ready to let go. I went online to my bank account and transferred the remaining balance into a savings account. It wasn't much, but it was enough to close the chapter on that card. I didn't need it anymore. I was enough. I had the job, I had the future, I had everything I needed. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, looking at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. I had changed so much in such a short time. From the woman who had been kicked out, betrayed, and left in the dark to the woman who now had her own life, her own job, her own strength. I had built this from nothing, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. I wasn't the same person I had been a month ago. I had found my way, and I wasn't looking back. I smiled at myself in the mirror, a small but real smile. I was finally free, and nothing was going to stop me now. It had been 3 months since I started working at the marketing firm. 3 months of hard work, constant learning, and a lot of self-doubt. But in those 3 months, I had also grown. I had built something, a life I could call my own. I wasn't just getting by anymore, I was thriving, and it felt incredible. Every day at work was a new challenge, but I had learned to embrace them. The team I worked with was supportive, the work itself was engaging, and slowly I was beginning to feel like I belonged. I was no longer the woman who had been left behind, abandoned, and broken. I had fought for my place in this world, and now it was finally paying off. But despite the progress I had made, there was still a part of me that couldn't quite shake the fear. The fear of losing everything again. The fear of being alone, without support. The fear of being forgotten. I had worked so hard to get here, and I wasn't about to let anything ruin it. One afternoon, I sat at my desk, going over some emails when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I glanced at the screen. "Hi, my name, it's Mark." The words sent a shock through me. I hadn't heard from Mark in months. The silence from his end had been deafening, and I had made peace with it. But now, seeing his name on my phone felt like a punch to the gut. I hesitated, staring at the message for a long moment. The old me would have panicked. I would have dropped everything and responded immediately, but not this time. I had worked too hard to let him back into my life so easily. I took a deep breath and typed a quick reply. "What do you want?" A few seconds later, the phone buzzed again. "We need to talk, it's important." I stared at the message. What could he possibly want after all this time? Was he trying to manipulate me again? Or was this his way of trying to come back into my life? I didn't know what to do. I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and, to be honest, a bit of fear. I didn't want him back. I didn't need him back. But part of me still wanted answers. Part of me still wanted closure, to understand why everything had happened the way it had. But then I remembered where I was now. I had a life. I had a job. I had a future that I had built for myself. I wasn't the same person who had been tossed aside months ago. I didn't owe him anything. I decided to ignore his message. I didn't need his drama anymore. I had made it without him, and I was stronger because of it. The next few days passed without any further word from Mark. I focused on my work, my personal growth, and the small but meaningful progress I was making in my life. The fear of losing it all had faded, and in its place, there was confidence. I knew I had what it took to make it on my own. But just as I was beginning to feel truly settled, something unexpected happened. One morning, I walked into the office, only to be greeted by Sarah, my boss. She was standing by my desk, a wide smile on her face. "Good morning, my name. I hope you're ready for some exciting news," she said, her voice filled with energy. I raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" "We're really impressed with your work so far," Sarah continued. "You've been making a huge impact, and we'd like to offer you a promotion." My heart skipped a beat. "A promotion, me?" "I'm honored," I said, trying to hide the shock in my voice. "What kind of promotion?" "We'd like you to move into a managerial position," she said, her eyes sparkling. "You'll have more responsibility, but you'll also have a bigger role in decision-making and overseeing the team. It's a step up, and we think you're ready for it." I sat there for a moment, trying to process what she was saying. This was a huge deal. A managerial role? It felt surreal. Just a few months ago, I had been struggling to make ends meet, unsure of where my life was headed. And now, here I was, being offered a position that would change everything. I'm speechless," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, I won't let you down." Sarah smiled warmly. "I know you won't. You've been working hard and you deserve this." The promotion was a game changer. It meant more responsibility, more work, but also more freedom and more control over my career. I was no longer just an employee, I was a leader. And that realization made me stand a little taller, walk with more confidence, and believe in myself even more. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I threw myself into my new role, taking on challenges I had once thought were beyond me. I was managing a small team, coordinating projects, and making decisions that impacted the company. It wasn't easy, but it was exactly what I needed. I thrived under the pressure. Every small success was a reminder of how far I had come, how much I had grown. But as my career took off, Mark reappeared again, like a shadow from my past. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment, enjoying a quiet moment after a long day. I had just finished some paperwork for work when my phone rang again. It was him. I almost didn't answer it. Part of me wanted to just block his number and forget he ever existed. But curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello," I said, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my tone. "My name, I need to talk to you. Please, just listen." Mark's voice came through the phone, sounding desperate. I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. I didn't owe him anything, but part of me still wanted answers. Part of me still needed closure. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my voice cold. "I'm sorry for everything. I know I hurt you, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I've made mistakes, he said, his voice cracking. I miss you. I want to make things right. I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. You miss me? I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. You kicked me out. You told me you didn't love me anymore, and now you miss me. I know I was wrong. I was selfish. I was a coward, but I'm not asking you to come back. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I want you to know that I've changed, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. You don't get to come back into my life after what you did. I've moved on. I don't need you anymore, Mark. I'm not the same person I was, and I'm not going to let you hurt me again. There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear him trying to come up with something else to say, but he couldn't. Goodbye, Mark, I said, my voice firm. I didn't wait for him to respond before I hung up the phone. I sat there, holding the phone in my hand, feeling a strange mixture of relief and pride. I had done it. I had finally let go of the past. I wasn't going to be dragged back into the same toxic relationship. I had built a life for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely free. Free from the fear, the pain, and the weight of Mark's betrayal. I was in control of my life now. I was in control of my future. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far I had come. I wasn't the same woman who had been kicked out of her home and left with nothing. I was stronger now. I had found my voice, my independence, and my purpose. I closed my eyes, smiling to myself. I knew that whatever happened next, I could handle it. I was no longer a victim. I was a fighter, and nothing could take that away from me. The morning after my conversation with Mark was quiet, too quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. I woke up, went through my morning routine, stretching, brushing my teeth, brewing coffee, and yet my mind kept wandering back to the phone call. Mark, after months of silence, he'd come back into my life, and I had told him exactly where he could go. But it wasn't as easy as that. Even though I knew I was right to shut him out, there was a part of me that still felt the weight of his words. I miss you. I want to make things right. The vulnerability in his voice had caught me off guard. He had never been that open before. But it didn't matter. I had to stay strong. He didn't deserve any part of me anymore. Not after everything he had done. Still, the memories lingered. How could they not? For 10 years, he had been my world. And now, all of a sudden, he wanted to fix everything? I couldn't understand it. I wouldn't understand it. I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts aside. I had worked so hard to get where I was. I had a job I loved, a sense of independence that felt more powerful than anything I had ever known. I wasn't about to throw that away for someone who didn't even respect me. But as the day went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something unfinished. Something between us still felt unresolved, like an open wound I had ignored. And no matter how much I tried to push it down, the need for closure gnawed at me. So that afternoon, I decided to face it head-on. I would see him. Not to reconcile, not to fall back into the same toxic pattern, but to finally get answers. I needed to hear it from him, to understand why he had done what he did. Maybe then I could let go completely. I drove to the place we used to call home. It didn't feel like home anymore, not to me, but I had to go. I couldn't live with the what-ifs. The house was the same. It looked the same, but everything else had changed. When I arrived, I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. It was a strange mix of emotions, nervousness, anger, but also a weird sense of finality. I wasn't here to beg. I wasn't here to cry. I was here to face the past, get the answers I needed, and move forward. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Mark. He looked different. Maybe it was just the way I saw him now, or maybe it was because I had changed, but he seemed smaller. His once confident posture was now slumped, his expression unsure. Hi, he said, his voice low. He didn't seem angry or defensive like I had expected. He just seemed tired. Hi, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I need to talk to you. He stepped aside and let me in, and we both stood there awkwardly in the hallway. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The silence between us felt thick, suffocating, but I couldn't back out now. I had to do this. I'm listening, he said, his voice quieter now, almost resigned. I looked him in the eyes. Why, Mark? Why did you do it? Why did you kick me out? Why did you tell me you didn't love me anymore? His gaze faltered, and I could see him struggling with the answer. I don't know, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I thought I needed to be free to get away from everything from you. But I was wrong. I made a huge mistake. I've been thinking about it every day since you left. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. So, that's it. You just thought you'd walk away and I'd just accept it like it was nothing. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. I never meant to hurt you, but I didn't know how to fix things. I was afraid. I thought that if I left, I could figure it out, but I couldn't, and now I see what I've done. I could feel my anger rising again, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to hear everything, even if it made me angry. I needed the truth. So, you just thought you'd walk away and that I'd be okay with it? I repeated, my voice shaking. You never even gave me a chance. You never even told me what was wrong. And now, what? You think you can come back and fix it all with a few words? He looked down, guilt flashing across his face. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I know it's too late for us, but I wanted to say it anyway. I took a deep breath. His apology didn't change anything. It didn't fix what he had done, but I realized something in that moment. I had spent so much time angry, so much time hurting, that I had forgotten something important. I was no longer that woman. I wasn't the one who had been left behind. I wasn't the one who had begged for answers. I was stronger now. I don't need your apology, Mark, I said, my voice firm. I needed you to be there for me. I needed you to love me. And you didn't. You chose to walk away, and that's not something I can just forget. You can say sorry all you want, but it doesn't change the fact that you broke me. You left me with nothing. He nodded, his expression full of regret. I know I did, and I hate myself for it, but I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I just wanted to be honest with you. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now that I was wrong. I could feel the anger inside me starting to fade, replaced by something else, something clearer, a realization. I had spent so much of my life trying to make him happy, trying to fix things that weren't my fault. I had been so wrapped up in him, in our life, that I had lost sight of who I was. But now, standing in front of him, I understood something crucial. I didn't need him anymore. I don't need you to fix anything, Mark, I said, my voice steady. I've already fixed myself. I don't need you to apologize. I need you to stay away. I need to move on. And I need you to do the same. There was a long pause as Mark absorbed what I was saying. I could see the pain in his eyes, but this time, it didn't affect me the way it used to. I wasn't the woman who had been destroyed by his actions anymore. I was the woman who had picked herself up, piece by piece, and rebuilt her life. Finally, he nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. I get it. I'm sorry, my name. I truly am. I took a deep breath and turned to leave. Goodbye, Mark, I said, my voice calm but resolute. I hope you figure things out, but I can't be a part of it anymore. And just like that, I walked out the door. As I drove away from the house, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't the kind of peace I had expected, but it was the peace I needed. I had faced the past head-on, and I had let it go. I didn't need Mark. I didn't need his apology. I only needed myself. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I was free, completely free. And no one was going to take that away from me again. The drive back from Mark's house was quiet. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long seemed to lift with every mile. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel after our confrontation, anger, relief, maybe even regret. But all I felt was peace. True peace for the first time in months. The kind of peace that comes from finally accepting something you can't change and choosing to let it go. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw nothing but open road behind me. That's how I felt now, like the past was behind me and the road ahead was wide open. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I took a deep breath, savoring the calm. My apartment still felt small, but it was mine. Every corner of it represented my journey. It wasn't a mansion, and I wasn't living in luxury, but it was a home. And more importantly, it was a symbol of everything I had achieved on my own. I parked my car and sat for a moment, staring out the windshield. There was no more looking back, no more wondering what could have been, no more second-guessing my decisions. Everything had led to this point, and I was finally ready to embrace my future. The door to my apartment clicked open, and the familiar scent of coffee and fresh linens greeted me. I set my keys down on the counter, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled to myself. The days that followed felt like a blur of small wins and quiet moments of reflection. I had been offered the promotion at work, and I took on my new role with determination. I was leading a team now, making decisions, and taking responsibility for my success. The work was harder than I had imagined, but it was fulfilling in a way that I never thought possible. I had earned my place here, and every day I proved to myself that I was capable. But it wasn't just work that was changing, it was everything. I felt more confident in my own skin than I ever had before. I was no longer living for someone else. I was living for me. One evening, after a long day of work, I sat on my couch, flipping through a magazine. The noise of the world felt distant, as if I were in my own bubble of peace. I had come so far from the woman I used to be, the woman who had been so scared, so unsure of herself. That woman had been lost, struggling to keep her head above water. But I wasn't her anymore. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, brick by brick, and every part of me was stronger because of it. As I sat there, a message notification popped up on my phone. It was from Linda, my colleague at work. "Hey, my name, you're doing an amazing job. Just wanted to say we're really glad to have you on the team. You're going places." I smiled to myself. Linda's words meant more than she probably realized. They weren't just about the work I was doing. They were about the journey I had taken to get here. And now, I was finally starting to believe in myself the way everyone else seemed to. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. A week later, I received a surprise email that almost knocked me off my feet. It was an invitation to a networking event for young professionals in my industry. The company I worked for was sponsoring the event, and they wanted me to attend as a representative of my department. It wasn't just a chance to network, it was a chance to show the world, and myself, how far I had come. I didn't hesitate for a second. I RSVP'd immediately, excited and nervous in equal measure. This was the kind of opportunity I had always dreamed of, the kind that felt like it was meant for someone else. But now, it was my turn. The night of the event arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress, smoothing my hair. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She was confident, poised, ready to take on the world. I walked into the event with my head held high, a sense of purpose guiding every step I took. The room was filled with professionals, people with years of experience, people who had been in the industry far longer than I had. But instead of feeling small, I felt at home. I belonged here, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel otherwise. I mingled with people, exchanged business cards, and engaged in conversations that felt meaningful. I wasn't just trying to fit in, I was building connections. Real, authentic connections. As the night wore on, I found myself speaking to more and more people who were impressed by what I had accomplished in such a short amount of time. By the end of the night, I was exhausted but exhilarated. I had learned so much, met so many inspiring people, and most importantly, I had proven to myself that I was capable of being here. As I left the event, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Sarah, my boss. "You were amazing tonight. You've come so far in such a short time. I'm really proud of you, my name. Keep shining." I read the message and couldn't help but smile. Sarah's words meant everything. She had seen me at my lowest point just a few months ago, when I had been unsure if I would even make it through the week. And now, she was telling me I was shining. That was the moment I realized just how far I had come. I wasn't the person I had been when I left Mark. I wasn't the woman who had begged for closure, who had been afraid of the future. I was the woman who had created her own future. I was the woman who had learned to fight for herself and won. The next few months flew by, each day feeling like a victory. I continued to excel at work, building relationships with my colleagues and proving myself more and more each day. The promotion I had received was just the beginning. The potential I had started to see in myself was growing, and I was determined to see just how far I could go. But it wasn't just work that was changing. I was growing in every aspect of my life. I was rediscovering who I was, what I wanted, and what I was capable of. I started taking better care of myself, physically and emotionally. I began exploring things I had always wanted to try, painting, traveling, cooking new recipes. Each small step felt like a reclaiming of the life I had once lost. One night, I sat in front of my canvas, paintbrush in hand, looking at the blank page in front of me. I had no idea what I was going to paint, but that didn't matter. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was doing this for me, and for the first time, I felt completely at peace with that. The strokes of paint were slow at first, hesitant, but as I went on, I found myself painting freely, without the fear that used to paralyze me. I was creating something beautiful, not just on the canvas, but in my own life. And then, one morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity. I had everything I needed. I had worked hard to rebuild my life, and I had done it all on my own. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And that was a feeling I never thought I'd experience again. I walked into my office that day, my head held high, knowing that no matter what happened, I had already won. I had fought for this life, and now it was mine. Mark's voice didn't haunt me anymore. His mistakes no longer defined me. I had let go of the past, and with every step I took forward, I was becoming more of the person I was always meant to be. I was free, and nothing could take that away from me. As I sat down at my desk, a smile spread across my face. I had found my way, and this was just the beginning.